Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Big East Rewind. My name is Chuck Everson from Villanova. I'm your host, and my co-host, as always, the stylish, and he's really styling today because I must have went to the store somewhere. You're gonna have to fill me in, Sonny, and my good pal, my good friend, Sonny Sparrow, ladies and gentlemen. Now, What did you put it? What did you put in your? What'd you get? Tresemme or some? What did you put in your hair?
You've been busting my chops about my hair being all over the planet. So I got some of that promenade, whatever stuff, and you rub it
Promenade.
on your
All right.
hand. It's a gel. It's not sticky. It's not gooey. I can still do this with my hair and it stays relatively fine. I'm up in my game.
So
Okay.
for
I'm
those of you listening to the show,
elevating
Sonny
my
just
game.
ran his own fingers through his hair, just so you know. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's
And the hair
hard to
stayed
tell
way
when you're
pretty.
listening, Sonny.
I know. I know. I just,
But
you
yeah,
got me up in
listen,
my hair game now. Like my wife is laughing. Like, what's up with this?
that's great. That's great. Well, you look good, very good. The sharp and ready to go, man. That's what we like here. You know.
Yeah, I got a great guest. This is my guy, man. This is my
I
guy.
I know, I know. I'm excited to talk to him. We're bringing in a guard, Sonny. See, not all bigs,
Well, on
not
top of
all
that, he's a
bigs.
guard. Yeah. Yep.
We're equal opportunity here at the Big East Rewind, Sonny. You know that.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, our guest hails from Brooklyn, New York, and he went to Jamaica High School, which I really want to hear about how that happens when you're live in one borough, from one borough, and you go to school in another. A Seton Hall Pirate. The Seton Hall Pirates are back in the house with us. He was a 1997-98 All Big East player, a 1,400-point scorer at Seton Hall. Sonny, Renaissance man. He was a European pro in the Czech Republic. He coached there, and he was an author. So I want to hear about his book, A Guide to Playing Professional Basketball in Europe. I'm very curious to hear about that today, too.
A little bit of an entrepreneur
And
too.
now
A little
And
bit.
now the Binghamton University Bearcats head coach, Levell
Wait,
Sanders.
say that.
How
Say
are you,
that one more
Levell?
time. Just say that one more time. What was
What?
that? Binghamton University
University
Bearcats head coach
Bearcats head coach. That's right. Head
in the
coach. Well,
house.
yeah. The guards, we first of all, welcome, Levell. Thanks for coming by and hanging with us today. Sonny and I get into this thing, if you can't tell. I was a center at 7 foot. Sonny's a 6'5" point guard until this guy Pearl Washington showed up. Then he was a 6'5" two guard. Okay. Who knew that he was so versatile in his game? But we have this thing about coaching, and you're the perfect guy to ask because you coached in Europe and here in the States on different levels, right? What do you think? Why are the point guards in particular, like the catchers in baseball, why are they make such good coaches? And the big guys get shortchanged, so to speak.
I think, just speaking for myself, I think, I had to, as a point guard, I had to know everything that was going on, on a team. Whether that was who was having a good day, who was having a bad day. I had to know all of the offense and the defense because you have to get guys in position and put guys in position. You're supposed to be the coach on the floor. And so I
So
think that's why,
you're not implying that we're smarter, but we had to have a better understanding of the game.
yeah, because, you can have I play with guys, or even now you coach guys and, you put them in a different position and they don't understand what's going on a court. And it's, I'm saying to myself, like, man, you're not even watching, what's going on. I had a film session today with one of the players, and it was a situation that was going on one side of the floor where a small guy switched onto a big guy, and the big guy had the small guy sealed under the basket, but the guy who had the ball, he didn't even know that was happening because as he was catching the ball, he was starting to drive the ball, and I was just explaining to him, like, well, you have to, like, be aware of what's going on the floor. So I think a lot of guys, when they're playing, they're only concerned about what they're doing. They're not looking or scanning the whole floor. And I think as a point guard, you have to really be able to put guys in position. And so I think that's why, you're able to figure a lot of things out. I know for me also is, a lot of things that that I do is, and that I teach, I was able to do those things on the court, and so it's easy for me to teach a lot of things because, I did those things, and I'm 40, I'll be 48 in December, but I played till I was 40 years old, so I've played recently, also, so the game is not that much different from when I was playing, so I think that goes to it, why that happens like that.
I think
Chuck,
there's something to be
let me
said for that,
summarize.
Sonny. I hate to admit that to
Wait,
you.
wait. Let me summarize for a second, okay?
Oh,
that was
you're going to
really,
explain it to the big guys. Is that what you're saying?
That was the really political correct answer to say, listen, we're just smarter and we know the game better, okay? Like,
well, I resemble that remark, Sonny. Come on.
You just got to deal
with me. So you listen. I've played for with a lot of great floor generals. Gary McLean was one, Stu Granger another. I played on the same team, believe it or not, with Nancy Lieberman and Michael Ray Richardson, and all of them had one trait in common, that they knew exactly what Levell was saying, where everybody was supposed to be. I remember Gary, if you watch some of the games in our 85 run, son, you'll see Gary tuck the ball under his arm and say, hey, you get here, and he's pointing out everybody where they're supposed to be. So, right, it's something, listen, it takes a lot to know where everybody is supposed to be. It really does. So, and do your job, because you also have a job to do on top of that, right? So now let me ask you, Levell, because we're kind of getting a little bit all over the place, and then we'll bring it right back on track. But I want to stay on this coaching thing for a second. Now, you coached in Europe, in the Czech Republic, right?
Yep.
What's it like? What's the difference? Now that you're coaching at Binghamton, you're the head coach of a D1 school. What were some of the differences between coaching European players and coaching the American players here in the States?
I think one of the biggest differences is that American players, to me, it seems like we try to do things by ourselves a lot, and a lot of the European players, and I think it comes from, they might not be as skilled, especially early on. They might not have the athleticism. And then also I think the way the game is taught over there from a young age, I think they try to include their teammates. But I think, over here in the US, we grow up on the playgrounds, or wherever we grow up at, we grew up doing a lot of, nowadays it's a lot of individual instruction. So things are really focused on the individual player. And in Europe, it's more of a team game, and guys are more inclusive to add in their teammates. And so I think that's one of the big differences. I think one of the biggest differences also in terms of coaching professional and college is just that, like, those guys are professional, and you can practice when you want. You can work out when you want. There's not as much restrictions as there is here in college basketball. And you're not working around any class schedules or in any of those things. So that's a big difference also in terms of you just have a lot more time to work with guys. Guys have a lot more time to work out in general. Now I mean, you got to go to school, and I was talking to Jake Falco, who he was over in Germany. He ended up leaving because his father had some health issues, so he came home. But and he was only over there a week, and it's what he said. It was all basketball. It's all basketball.
What about basketball IQ from the European side versus the American side? Is for years and years and years, the Americans have been dominant in the sport of basketball, and then the Europeans now have come in. There's a ton of Europeans now playing in the NBA, and have been for a number of years. What about basketball IQ at that age and stuff when you're coaching young men over there in Europe?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times basketball IQ, you become smarter when you don't have the ability. You look at a lot of American players that are not athletic. I think about a Big East guy, Mark Jackson, right, who wasn't an athletic guy, but was very cerebral, right, because you have to figure out ways how to beat your opponent. And so a lot of the European players are not as athletic. They're not as fast. They're not as quick. They don't jump as high. And so they have to figure out ways how to beat their opponents. And so I think that IQ component becomes much more of a factor. And those guys learn the game more. A lot of my American teammates that I've played with overseas, we had one kid, and he was super athletic, but he had no basketball IQ, right? Because he always just wanted to jump and out jump people and try to block every shot. And he was really fast, and he didn't have to figure out all of the things that you have to figure out when you don't have the athleticism. And so I think that's one of the factors in basketball IQ is a lot of those guys over there. And it's not players are becoming a lot more athletic in general. But I think that that's a big component of it, not having the ability that some of the players have over here. And so you got to figure out ways how to beat your opponent.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that. So take us now. You grew up in Brooklyn and you wind up going to school in Jamaica. How did that work out?
So I got it. So I started out at Abraham Lincoln High School.
Okay.
My mother went there, and so I wanted to follow in her footsteps. So I go to Abraham Lincoln. I thought I should have made the varsity team as a freshman. I didn't make the team. And so I played JV. And one of my uncles, a guy that coached my uncle, saw me play and told my grandmother, "Hey, I can make that kid an All-American from head to toe." And he was coaching at Laurinburg Institute in Laurinburg, North Carolina. His name was Gil Reynolds. Gil Reynolds coached, Albert King, coached a lot of really good players. Bernard King coached all these guys back in the days. And Gil was, probably the best coach that I've played for in terms of like teaching the game, fundamentally sound. I mean, he was dynamite. And so I ended up leaving Lincoln, and my sophomore year, I go down to Laurinburg, North Carolina, and go to prep school at Laurinburg Institute. And so we didn't have a math or science teacher from September to February. And so my grandmother was like, "Oh, you got to get out of there. You can't stay there." And so had a great experience that one year down at Laurinburg with Gil Reynolds. I grew to 6'2". I went down there like 5'9", came back, I was like 6'2".
Something in the water.
Yeah, worked on my game. Was a really good player. And so I'm coming back, and my zone school was Boys and Girls High School. That's my zone school in Brooklyn. But because I'm living in the neighborhood, I don't want to go there where everybody else is going. And so a good friend of mine, I saw him that summer, and he was telling me that he was averaging 16 points a game at Jamaica High School. Now his name was Travis, but we called him Crip because he walked with like a limp. He had a bad hip. And so I was like, hold on, this kid that has a limp is averaging 16 points a game. I'm gonna average 30, So I said, okay, I'm going to Jamaica High School. And I needed an address, so he let me use his address. So I get signed into school, and ended up going to Jamaica. I was going hour and 40 minutes to school every day.
Wow.
For 3 years. So that's how I ended up at Jamaica High School.
Statute of limitations ran out, so they're not going to get in trouble for the fake address.
It's not even open anymore.
You're okay.
Yeah.
We don't want to forfeit those games from back then.
Right.
So
right.
I got to ask you. So now you make it. You're doing well at Jamaica High School. Did you get to 30 points a game? Just curious.
26.
Oh,
Pretty close. Pretty close, honey.
All right. So now you're starting to make waves. You're becoming a known product in the New York City basketball metro area. And I know Syracuse, because I'm going to throw my school in here now as one of my people. I know they got involved in your recruiting. Talk about the recruiting process for you specifically and how that went down.
Yeah. So I got a kind of weird story because I play at Jamaica, and Coach Thompson I had never been to camp. I was just strictly like playing outside for fun. Didn't play much organized basketball. And when I got to Jamaica, Coach Thompson was like, "Man, you got to go to camp." And so
You got to get seen, right?
huh?
You got to get seen, right?
Yeah. So he's like, "You got to go to camp." So he ended up getting me into 5-star camp. And I go to 5-star camp, one of those sessions in July, and I become MVP of the camp. So my name is on that list with a bunch of, who's who. I was the best point guard of the camp. And from there, my recruitment starts to blow up. And I got sick. I couldn't play my last year of high school. I got sick for the last 3 months of school. I had pneumonia, and I missed the last 3 months of school. And so I didn't graduate because I missed the last 3 months, right? And so I had to do a fifth year of high school, and so I couldn't. They don't allow you to do a fifth year in New York, in the state of New York. So what I did was I played with Mr. Lorch in Riverside. I played with his AAU team.
Yep.
Played with his AAU team. Played in the wintertime when all of the high school stuff was going on. I was playing against Fordham JV team and Columbia's JV team, and we were playing in these different prep school tournaments. And I remember going to St. Bonaventure Seton Hall game with Mr. Lorch, and PJ comes before the game comes over and says, "Hey, I'm gonna recruit the hell out of you, da da da." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But so when I went to camp, I played pretty well, and I had a ton of letters. Like when I came back to school, I mean, just a bunch of schools. Wayne Morgan, who's from Brooklyn, started recruiting me. He was at Syracuse, and it was just a Brooklyn connection. And Syracuse was one of the last 3 schools that I narrowed my list down to. Went to visit Rhode Island because Al Skinner and my godfather were close. Then I went to visit Seton Hall, and after I visited Seton Hall, I committed on my visit, so I didn't even get a chance to visit Syracuse. So I had to call Coach Morgan and let him know. So I didn't even get a chance to visit.
Couldn't have been a good call.
Those calls are never. I experience those calls now, right? And so those calls are never good calls.
It's tough. No matter not at Syracuse, anybody, when you got to call and say, and you want to celebrate where you're going, right? You have all this excitement, but then you really do, and you could tell though you took care of your business, right? Instead of just leaving it out there, you said, I got to let them know and not leave them hanging. So that was definitely the smart professional move. So
yeah,
definitely. So you go to Seton Hall. What was it like when you stepped on campus in East Orange?
It was it was hard getting there. Number one, because I want to say the first year 94, that was when all of the clearinghouse stuff started. And so I was really messed up with the clearinghouse. And so I started school maybe like 2 or 3 weeks late, just kind of trying to get things figured out with the clearinghouse.
It's hard as a freshman.
Yeah. And so, but being at Seton Hall, I wanted to play for PJ Carlesimo, growing up in Brooklyn when I did, watching Terry DeHare and all those guys, Oliver Taylor, who, we wore the same number 20, Gerald Green, just watching all those guys, John Moten. I wanted to, and I wanted to play for Coach Carlesimo because he was kind of like the biggest thing in at that time, in the metropolitan area. When I was coming up, Coach Carnesecca was finishing, right? So Brian Mahoney had took over, and they actually recruited me. But Coach Carnesecca, of course, was a big deal, but he was finished, right? And so Coach Carlesimo was the biggest name in the area at the time. And so, I remember when I signed my letter of intent and he came to Brooklyn with the big blue Cadillac, and everybody was outside in my neighborhood, waiting for him to come for me to sign my letter of intent, and kind of got mobbed, in Brooklyn.
PJ the rock star, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was great. I knew one of the guys that was at Seton Hall. He was also a Brooklyn guy. Shaka Ship was there. He actually went to Lincoln when I was at Lincoln. So, Adrian Griffin, who's now the head coach of the Bucks, was my roommate my freshman year. Played played my first 2 years with Danny Hurley, who was a really, really funny dude and really interesting guy. So it was great being at Seton Hall and coming on campus. It was close to Brooklyn, but it kind of felt like it was a total different world, being at Seton Hall. I was able to get back and forth home when I needed to. So it was good. Had a lot of fun.
Okay. Chuck, you want to take the next one?
I just I got froze out there for a second, Sonny. So
Okay.
Okay, so you get recruited by PJ and you get to campus and now you're playing for George Blaney.
Yeah. So I remember it was I don't know, it was rumors going around, you coach said, hey, Coach Carlos might be going to the NBA, blah blah. And I remember getting a call. I was in Brooklyn. Coach Carlos Moore calls my house and he's like, hey, it's difficult conversation, blah blah. He was just saying, like, listen, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so, I'm leaving. I'm going. I'll be the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers. But I'll watch you. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you believing in me. All of those kind of things. And Coach Blaney calls me and says, listen, if you still want to come, we would love to have you. And so, wanted to go to Seton Hall. It was the Big East, conference that I grew up watching. And so I made the decision to go. And then, Coach Blaney was a really good guy. I mean, I remember the first day I had a really good practice, my first day of practice. And I remember Coach Blaney pulling me into the office and saying, listen, the way you play today is the way I want you to play. I don't want you to come in here and think you're a freshman. I want you to come in here and be who you are. And, it was really learned a lot from Coach Blaney, along with Greg Harinda and God bless his dad, Coach Williamson, who coached us at Seton Hall. Really, really, really good guys.
It's funny because I was recruited by Coach Blaney when he was up at Holy Cross. And I never forget because I didn't know he was coming. And at those days, they came, the coaches came over to your house and it was kind of a big deal. I had a guy that was running my recruiting named Steve Rochester, and Steve was there and my dad.
Did he have a blue Cadillac or no?
No blue Cadillacs. No, he had a purple Rolls Royce or something from Holy Cross. Anyway, so he comes in and he says to me, hey, Chuck, if you played for me and I asked you to run from one end of the court to the other, how fast would you run? And I'd say, I'd run as fast as I can, coach, And so then he says to me, if I was running behind you, screaming in your ear, then how fast would you run? I said, I'm probably a little fast. My father goes, Coach, thanks a lot, but this interview's over. We'll see you. Have a nice day. Have a good, it was one of those things. So I'm curious. I don't really know anybody that actually played for him. Was he a screamer and a yeller like that in practice?
No.
It was bizarre that he even said that. I was like, why would you even ask me that question?
Yeah, no. Coach Blaney was, he was a nice guy. He was mild mannered. He didn't scream and yell a lot. I think he hired Greg Harinda and Coach Williamson to do that. Those guys really got after the players. But Coach Blaney was. He wasn't a screamer or yell at all. It was a really good guy.
Like the opposite of PJ, because PJ was strong.
Total opposite.
Yeah.
Total opposite. Yep, total opposite of PJ. So
interesting.
No, not a screamer and yell at all.
So during your time,
players. Go ahead, Chuck.
Right. Sorry. During your time in the Big East, you got to play against a few Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers. You got to play against a bunch of different guys. So what we're going to do is I want to shoot some names at you, Coach. And you tell me your memory, an anecdote, a story about each one of these guys. Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Yep.
Allen Iverson from Georgetown. What do you remember about playing against the answer?
I just remember how confident he was, you know. I remember one story. So he scored his sophomore year, our sophomore year. He scored 40 points twice that year.
Oof.
Preseason NIT against Arizona, and then at Georgetown against us. And I had a reputation as a good defensive player, and so a lot of times when other teams had a good perimeter player, I had to guard that guy. And so of course this was my assignment. And I remember my freshman year, he played his ankle, he had a hurt ankle or something. So he didn't play as much, or didn't play as well. I think he scored he scored like 9 or 10 points or something like that. Didn't score a lot. Couldn't shoot it well his freshman year. So this is sophomore year now. And scouting report is back up off of him, make him shoot it, get a hand up. And I remember early in the game, we right in front of our bench, and he has the ball, and I'm guarding him, and I'm giving him space. Don't really have my hand up, and he hit a 3-point shot, and he turned around. As he's running back, he looked at the coaches, and he's like, "You better tell him to play some defense." And I'm like, "Oh my Lord, here we go." And so, I don't know, about 5 minutes later, he probably got about 15 points. I got 2 fouls. I'm on the bench, and I remember after the game, and Danny, he always busts my chops about this. He always tell me that I picked up an early 2 fouls, so he would have to guard Allen Iverson, yeah, he was just so quick with the ball. Once he got a full head of steam, it was really nothing you can do. Those guys that he played with, Jerome Williams, Othello Harrington, really good rebounders. So when they would rebound the ball, he would take off running. They would throw him the ball, and it was really nothing you could do. And so, super, super talented, but a guy that loved to compete. And again, like I said, I just remember how confident he was. And I remember Coach Blaney said this one time. He was talking about everybody, complaining about how many shots he's taking, but he was like, man, it's remarkable that a guy can take 25, 30 shots a game. It takes a lot out of you, and it takes a lot to be able to take that many shots. So Coach Blaney was always talking about it. It's not about how many shots he's taking, but it's like how he's doing it, right? And it's that kind of volume takes a lot. And he was a super athlete, 2-sport guy. So really, really good memories playing against him.
How about another Hall of Famer and another Allen, Ray Allen? How about playing against Ray?
Yeah, I remember. I want to say, I think it was my freshman year, maybe my sophomore year. I'm not sure, but we playing at the Meadowlands, and we're coming out to warm up. And I was always one of the first guys to come out to warm up, and Ray Allen was out there already, but he's on our side of the court instead of being on where he's supposed to be warming up, but he's warming up on our side. And I'm walking out, and as I'm walking out, I just see him banking like NBA 3-pointers in, like on purpose. And he's just coming to my bank, boom, 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 going and going and going. And I'm like, oh my God. So again, another guy. He's 6'5", 6'6". I'm 6'2", and of course I had to guard him. I think he had like 36 that game. But I remember that game, I was diving for a loose ball. And it was a phone on a press row, and I banged my head, so I had to get stitches, go shave my head, get stitches, come back in, and it was a timeout, put me back in the game, and got a little headache or whatever, and he made it worse. He's I think scored 3 threes in a row, running off screens, but he was just like super smooth, didn't say anything on the court, but just was constant motion, was as we know, one of the best shooters of all times. But he was just super smooth, real kind of quiet on the floor, and just went out there and handled his business. But really, really talented player. I remember we had one of those like monster dunks on us at in stores, and it was like one of those dunks that was they played it on, before like the game started. It was one of those kind of highlights where he went down the lane and dunked it. And we were on that highlight for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's not the highlight you want to be on.
No, no, no.
Yeah. So
On a
now
lot
I
of
gotta ask you,
the wrong ends, lot of a wrong end, a lot of highlights.
I got a couple more guys that I want to ask you about, and then I think Chuck's got one more to ask you about too. So I'm gonna ask you about a guy from Chuck's school, which I'm interested that he deferred to me, but we're gonna get you Kerry Kittles. What was that like?
Yeah. He was kind of like Ray Allen, in the sense that he was about the same size. Uh, but I mean, they ran him off those screens, and he had, what was it, Chuck Carnegie and
Yeah.
Jason Lawson were the two big guys.
Yeah.
Man, they used to set them screens for him. Um, I remember beating Villanova. They were, I think, 11 in the country, and we played him at the Meadowlands, and we ended up beating him. But he was really, really good. Constant motion. He was really athletic. He had the one high sock, the one low sock. But I remember I want to say my freshman year, we go to the, I guess, the preseason Big East banquet or whatever it was. And on the cover was like him, Ray Allen, I think John Wallace. Oh no, it was Lawrence Moten. It was him, Lawrence Moten, John Wallace. Oh, him, Lawrence Moten, and I think Ray Allen maybe on the cover of the magazine. So some big time players back then.
You got that right. All
Yeah.
right, the next guy I'm gonna ask you, another Husky, who was another shooter who was definitely off of those screens too. Rip Hamilton, long NBA career, stud. Everybody probably remembers him for the glasses that he wore, but that's another pure shooter. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a little bit of the same. I think he was. I think Rip was a little bit more versatile than um, Lawrence, not Lawrence, Kerry Kittles and Ray Allen, like in college. He handled the ball a little bit more. He played some point guard. But again, another one of those guys that were able to come off screens, catch and shoot, constant motion. Big time player. Played with him and Khalid El Amin in the backcourt were
Yeah.
real tough. At Connecticut at that time, and so yeah, he was a really, really, really good player, man. Again, those guys, when you were playing against those guys, and you were doing a scout report, you knew what you were getting into. So, but it was fun. It was fun. All of those guys had presented different challenges, and it was fun to compete against those guys.
Okay, last guy. Let's talk about your buddy, your backcourt mate, Shaheen Holloway. Talk about him and what that was like. I guess, at Villanova, we had the blue team and the white team. The blue was the starting five. The white team was the second team. You guys probably played together a lot in practice. I don't know if they matched you guys up, but talk about what it was like playing with him and having to guard him.
Yeah, and I think somebody asked me this before, and I was saying, like, being able, like, playing against guys like him every day in practice, it gave you the confidence that you can guard, Rip Hamilton, or he didn't play with Iverson. He wasn't in the league when Iverson was in the league, but Avontigo Cummins, or guys that were really good players. But he was tough. I mean, the thing about Shy was, he was another really confident player in his ability, and he had he had the ball on a string. He could get anywhere he wanted to get to on the court. He shot it well. It was really. I mean, I was thinking about my senior year. One of the we playing at the Great Alaska. Was the Great Alaska
Great
Shootout?
Alaskan Shootout.
Alaska
Yeah.
Shootout, yeah.
We're going to play the Great Alaska Shootout. And the
That's
first
big time.
day we get there, we go practice, and we playing one-on-one. Like Shy and I were playing one-on-one, and I think I came down on his ankle and turned my ankle, and I couldn't play in the Great Alaska Shootout. But it's just, we would always compete. And it was challenging, but again, he was another one of those guys that I think, like Allen Iverson, was really confident in his ability, and I think his confidence wore off on his other teammates, and you can see it now when he coaches. He has that same confidence when he coaches, and it rubs off on his players.
We started this thing by talking about backcourt people playing and coaching. Right now, here we got a backcourt that played together for 2 years in college, right? And you're both head coaches. What did you make of his run with St. Peter's to the Elite Eight that year? I mean, obviously you guys are still close. So what did you make of that when you saw that happen for Coach? You had to feel good.
Yeah, I was my wife was overseas at the time, and my daughter had a gymnastics event in New Jersey. And I remember I was so upset because I thought I was going to miss the game. But when the schedule stuff came out, it was like bang bang. So as soon as that event was over, we got in the car and we were coming home. And I remember sitting and watching those games and just having goosebumps, seeing his team compete and play the way they played, and especially when you know somebody, and it's not like you know him, like it's like my brother, right? Like we really know each other. And
Sure.
So when that happens, I kind of felt like I was living it as well. I mean, like I said, every day that them games are coming on, and when I was watching those games, I would watch those games, and I just had goosebumps, and I would just, I know he was getting pulled in from everywhere, so I would just send him a small little text after the game to say, congratulations, whatever. But it was really good, and it was also inspirational. It was like, man, if he can do that, it gives you some belief and some inspiration that you can do the same thing. And so it was great to see.
Can I ask you? I got to ask you about one question, because the leading scorer of the Big East up until a couple of years ago was Lawrence Moten. You played against him, was it 1 year or two?
1 year.
1 year. So he's a senior, you're a freshman, right?
Yep.
So what was that like? Like he was a quiet scorer though, but you're playing against literally kind of legendary guy at the time in the Big East for sure.
Yeah.
And you're a freshman. Was that on the roadmap too, that you got that assignment or no?
Yeah, I did. I didn't start as a freshman, but when I did come in, because I played the two guard in college, right? So I was being recruited as a combo guard. Coach Carlissimo said that, if Danny didn't come back, because there was some issues that maybe he wasn't going to come back. So if Danny didn't come back, then I was going to be a point guard. But if Danny came back, then I would be a two guard. So he ended up coming back playing 2 years, and so I was the two guard. So I would always guard the two guard. So yeah, I got a chance to play against him. We actually beat them. It was the first and last time that they stormed the court while in my career at Seton Hall. I think there were a number.
Hold on. You really got to throw that. You got to put that in there right now.
Yeah. Because we didn't
change that story a little bit.
Well, we didn't beat.
You had to go there, Sonny. To Syracuse. That's what you get.
I did. I set myself up.
We didn't beat Syracuse quite often, and so they were ranked. I want to say they were definitely top 25 in the country. They stormed the court, but he was good. He was smooth. You know what I mean? He was smooth.
Right.
He wasn't
poetry and motion, baby.
Yeah, poetry and motion. He wasn't really a like a quick or anything, but he knew how to score. He had a really good shot. He was about 6'5". He was smooth, smooth. And I had watched him for 3 years, playing in the Big East, right? And so, when you come in and you come into a league and you've watched these guys for that many years, it's like, you're kind of, you get pumped up to play against those kind of guys. And so it was definitely good playing against Lawrence.
Yeah, yeah, I get it, man. You got, and when you go back and you're talking to your kids or your friends and people, and they ask you who you got to play against, who was the best guys you got to play against, you got quite the list. I have to say that was a great time for basketball in the Big East Conference at that particular time.
Yeah, you know what? And I always say I think for me, Allen Iverson was probably the best one that I
Sure.
played against. But I think for when I was in the Big East, I thought John Wallace at Syracuse was like the hardest person for us to defend because he was a big guy, but he wasn't a big guy, right? He was
Yeah.
able to shoot threes, he was able to put it on the floor. And so we always struggled to guard him because we had traditional big guys at Seton Hall when I was there. Jackie Cabo was a 6'10 center, and he really wasn't able to guard him on the perimeter. And so he was super tough for us to handle when I was in school.
So let's go back to your backcourt mate for a minute. So now this whole thing happens with St. Peter's, and it's a phenomenon, and it's like insanity for college basketball. It showed that there was parity, on a lower D1 team being able to get in the mix and almost get to the Final Four was a spectacular run. Now he comes to Seton Hall. All right. What do you think? I mean, do you guys close enough that you talk about this kind of stuff? Now it's a whole different animal. Now you're in the Big East again, and the Big East is still a really, really good conference. And you went from one to the other, and now you take your lumps a little bit. I mean, is that something that he expected, or is that something that you guys talked about? Did he mention anything to you and say, hey, what do you think, or anything like that, or did he come to you with anything that he was going through?
No, I mean we spoke about just him feeling feeling a lot more pressure, being
Sure.
at his alma mater. And I think the thing about Shy is he's really passionate about Seton Hall and he wants to do well because he spent a lot of his life there. And so I think that adds a lot more pressure for him. And then also I think, the era that we're in right now in college basketball, with all of the NIL and stuff.
Right.
Seton Hall is not a major player, right? And so if you're not a major player in that NIL game, then you're probably not going to be at the top, right? Just because you're not going to get the same opportunities that the other schools have that have the money.
Right.
So that's something that I think is on his mind.
Yeah.
But I do think if I'm correct, I think he probably, I think he had the best record of any first year head coach
Yeah.
at
He did
Seton
well.
Hall, and
Yep.
so he had a nice run. A couple games here and there, and he's in the NCAA tournament, and so I think he's only going to get better. He's going to figure out the landscape, right? You're playing, you're coaching against different coaches, different
Yep.
styles, and so I'm looking for them to do even better than they did last year. And again, I think Shy is one of those coaches that he can get the best out of the guys that he have, even though if he doesn't have the big names.
Yep.
Like a lot of other schools, I think he can get the best out of the guys that he has.
Well, let's stick on the topic because I was going to mention it. You brought it up. I'm sorry, Sonny. You brought it up. How on your level are the mid majors? Like you're a part of at Binghamton, and now you go into the Big East. Whether it's the Big East versus that kind of the difference in levels. How much does the NIL come into play in your world versus, say, Syracuse or Villanova or one of the bigger schools in the Big East Conference, because and the portal? Because I don't think that Coach K and Coach Williams and Coach Wright all left within a calendar year of each other by accident. I mean, it's got to be exhausting to constantly recruit a kid, because now you have a kid, right, Coach? And now you recruit him and you think on the normal conditions when we played, I'm there for 4 years unless something drastic happens, and then I have to sit out, right? So you think in your mind, you recruit Sonny Sparrow to be your 2 guard, right? And you think you got Sonny for 4 years when you really may not, because you're going to have to keep him happy. You're going to have to keep recruiting him. Talk about that dynamic, if you will.
Yeah. So NIL is not in terms of like, Villanova or Syracuse, at our level is nowhere near what it is at that level. But the thing about it is that because of the transfer portal and like all of these guys that are transferring, so there are guys that are at Syracuse, that are at Villanova, that are transferring and are leaving because they are not playing and they're not happy.
Right.
And so when those guys want to come down to a level like ours, yes, they want to know if there's some NIL opportunities. But I think when guys are leaving those programs and they're coming down to our programs, I think they're coming because they want to play now, right? They've had a taste of the chartered flights and all of that stuff. And now when they come down to our level, it's like, well, you know what? I got a year left, or I got 2 years left. And so I want to play and really make something out of, my college career. And so I think that's the one advantage we have. But, with the transfer portal being what it is, we are in the run-ins to recruit, kids just like, a school in the Atlantic 10 is, or just like a school in the Big East is. But again, those schools are going to win out because they have opportunities that we don't have, and they have NILs opportunities that we don't have. And so, yeah, it becomes tough, and it becomes tough for coaches to retain players because, if you do have a kid, like we got some freshmen this year, right? So just say our freshmen end up playing well, right? Well, it's going to be hard for us to keep them because some bigger school is going to swoop in and promise them this and promise them that. And is it the right move? It may be, it may not be, and I'm all for kids. I never want to hold anybody back that believes that another situation is better for them. But a lot of times these situations are not better, and it's hard to tell a kid that because then a kid thinks that, you don't want them to go because you're thinking more about yourself and your program, where no, that's not it. I'm thinking about you. That's why, I'm trying to explain to you that it's not a better situation. So but it's created so much more work for coaches. I mean, like in the past, when you were in school, you never, I'm pretty sure there was never a situation where you had 8 new teammates coming to a team or 9 new teammates.
Or 13, right? Like St. John's, 13,
right? That's never happened. And so that is right now, that is happening year by year, every year. We already know, right now we have 6 scholarships for next year. Right now, we know that, and, who knows, we might have 1 or 2 more,
So how does it work then, Coach, when, you look at the portal and you see my name, for example, right? And you see that the guy averaged 2 points, at Georgetown or, at Kentucky, okay? And he averaged, a board and a half and 2 points. Now, you don't know, and he's complaining that he didn't play. You don't know, because there's not enough film for you to watch the kid. You see him in there, you go, he could really help us, I think. But how do you determine whether those numbers are real or, he's just not getting enough run at that place? Maybe he's our level player and he'll excel at this level and show what he can really do. How do you determine that?
Well, a big part of that is recruiting, right? And so when you are out on the road, so like this year was the first year that I went to the EYBL circuit, right? That's the Nike circuit. And why did I go there? I went there this year because those same kids that's going to go to Kentucky and Kansas and all of these places, when they're not going to play, at least I have seen those guys play a year before, 2 years before, right? So I've seen him play and I know what he can and can't do. And then what I need to do is I need to contact Kansas or Kentucky or whatever it is and find out what was going on there, because he might not be playing because he's a knucklehead, right? So you don't want to be involved with that. But a lot of it is you have to go and see these kids now when they are like we have to look at some of the best players in the country, right? Because some of those guys that are the 31st ranked player or the 50th ranked player, they're going to go somewhere and they might not have any success. They might not play well, and then they're going to want to transfer, right? So if I've
Right.
seen him, and if I know somebody that know him, then that situation now I can evaluate and say, okay, you know what, yay or nay. But that's how you do it, because you cannot go off of, like there was a kid at Syracuse that, he had like practice film. He didn't even have any game film. He just had practice film to look at, and that's hard, to just look at somebody in practice and say a couple practice highlights and say, you know what, I'm going to take him. It's hard to do, and so you got to really do your rounds and try to see these kids when they're in high school.
The grass is not always greener, and it goes both ways. I mean, a kid that averages 15, 17 points with you guys thinks now he can go to the ACC and do that, and really he's a role player, and you got to be straight with him without looking. I get it. I mean, that's got to be real hard, man. How you
and that's the hard thing, because they're taking our best players and then they're going to these schools and they're just role players,
right.
And sometimes they don't even become role players. They go there and they don't play. And that's the hard part for schools like us, because we're kind of like the farm teams now. We're the farm team where kid comes here and play well and do well, and then all of a sudden, he's going to Connecticut or whatever it is. But but again, it's just
like the Pirates in baseball, and some of these other smaller market teams, right? They get these young talents. Yep. And then boom, they're at the Yankees, or boom, we're with the Dodgers. Yeah, it's a true story. Yeah.
It's got to be tough on the kid, because everybody's feeling, all his boys and stuff at home are telling him how great he is, right? And he dropped all these numbers, and now all of a sudden he's not playing. I mean, it's got to be devastating, and it's funny because I know kids that are playing currently, and are in the portal and switching teams, and one kid came and talked to me and he said, "What do you think?" And I'm going, "Hey, I think you got a good situation where you are. The coach is going to be let go. There's going to be a new coach coming in. I think you should hang out and see what happens first before you jump in and not know what's going on." Because I guess the rules are, you correct me if I'm wrong, Levell, but the rule, I mean, you can't be contact. You can't go poach a kid from another team, right? I mean, so you can't be contacted. So you're going in blind. You're going in the portal blind, right?
You're not supposed to, but come on, that stuff is happening.
No, there are wills, there are ways. We know that,
Yeah, but you're not supposed to. Yes,
there's a non-direct way to get to that point, right? It's maybe not point A to point B. Maybe it's point A to D, then F, then E, then go back to point B. There you go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's wild, man. It's funny because some teams you start to see now, these guys are playing for their brand, so they're playing for the name on the back of the jersey instead of the name on the front, and that becomes a problem.
Levell and I just had this conversation offline.
Oh, did you?
About brand, yeah. Right? It's the reality.
Crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. It's all right. So let's go. Let's go talk about, how do I play in Europe? You wrote the book, okay? What are the keys to playing in the European leagues?
So when I wrote that book, I had played in the Czech Republic for quite some time, and all of the new players that came over would always reach out to me, Facebook, find my number somehow, and just ask me questions. And so I was like, man, they asked me all of these questions. I might as well just put the stuff in a book. And so I was basically talking about, dealing with, a lot of times, as Americans, we don't have the greatest reputation outside of the US. And so once we get outside of the US, I think we got to try to assimilate to wherever we're at. And so I was just telling guys, like, listen, you should try to at least learn a little bit of the language we're at, how to say hello, how to say goodbye. there's a lot of things that go on with coaches and agents. Like I was in a situation in Belgium where I was playing really well. I think I ended up playing like 6 or 7 games, averaged like 18 points, 6 assists, and they fired the coach. And I was over there on a tryout, and my agent told me, this is not going to work out. And I'm like, why? And he was like, well, because I know this coach, and this coach, he wants half of the agent fee. If you don't give him half of the agent fee, he's not going to take you as a player. And he said, listen, I don't agree with that. So because my agent wouldn't give him half the agent fee, which is 10%, the agent usually get 10% of whatever you make.
Right.
So that means the coach want 5% of that. And so just because my agent wouldn't give him 5%, he didn't, he's not going to take me. It's not about if I'm good enough or if I'm helping a team or whatever it is. It's about, well, I want to, as a coach, I want to make some extra money. And if this guy is not going to do it, I'm going to find the agent that is going to do it. So then it's not about, you're not good enough to play. It becomes politics involved, right?
Yeah.
So was the coach named Paulie Walnuts? Anything like that? Was it?
No. But like those things happen. I was trying to alert guys to stuff like that happening. I talked about just, when I, being over there for as long as I was over there, not going home for Christmas and maybe going somewhere in Europe to visit, another country to take advantage of that. Because it's funny, I was just talking about that today with one of the coaches. Around Christmas time, they always blame the Americans if you lose a game, because they always say you're not focused. You were looking forward to go home, And so when I decided to start to stay over in Europe, they couldn't use that on me anymore, right? You can't say that I'm not focused. I'm looking for
all in, right?
Yeah. I'm not going home, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just little things like that, just trying to teach guys how to take care of themselves. Go over there, understand it's a job. You're getting paid to do it. It's a job. You have to be good at what you do. You have to work at what you do. A lot of guys get over there and they want to party and hang out and go to clubs and, and it's easy to get caught up in those kind of things. But I remember John Moten that went to Seton Hall, he told me he used to come back to Seton Hall and work out. And I remember him telling me, like, when I was going overseas, like, listen, man, you want to find a country where you could play 10, 15 years and then you retire, I kind of took his advice, right? Because a lot of guys go over there and they bounce around from country to country to country. And the reason why I had an opportunity to coach after I finished playing was because I was in that country for a number of years, and people had an opportunity to know me as a person, not just as a player, me being there for 1 year, but had an opportunity to know me as a person. And I was afforded that opportunity, but like not everybody understands that. So I kind of put that book out just to try to give guys some of that information. Because again, those were some of the things that people were asking me about, different countries to play in. And, I heard a lot of horror stories about people not getting paid and all of these things. And I can say I played 17 years and coached for 4 years. So I was over there for 21 years. There was one time that a team came to me and said, listen, they came to me in November and said, hey, sorry, we lost one of our sponsors. We're going to have to cut your salary by 40%. Right. And that was the one time in all of my years of playing over there that something like that happened. Now I've heard a ton of stories and things about that, but I haven't experienced that firsthand. So that was the one situation that happened to me. But guys leaving before they get their money and thinking that the team is going to send them money and just a lot of things that I was trying to alert guys to and give them some information about.
What about endearing yourself to the country? I mean, I know you learn the language, right? You speak Czech fluently, correct? Because we do our due diligence here.
Yes.
I don't want you to think, we don't know things. Tell them, Sonny.
Professional journalists. We are professional journalists.
Like a guy like I played with John Pannone. John did all his interviews in Spanish, so the people there loved John. Did you find that helped you?
that stuff goes a long way. And that's what I was saying, early on. If you go over there and you just learn how to say hello, goodbye, how are you, those things go a long way. If you stay somewhere long enough and you get an opportunity to speak the language, like I've done some interviews in Czech, and Czech is a really hard language. When I first went over there in 1998, I think they were telling me it was like the seventh hardest language in the world, and so it's a really hard language, and so people appreciate when you and I don't say everything perfectly, but people understand what I'm trying to say. um but it's when you do things like that, or you come over there and you try the food, and you kind of, like you said, indulge yourself in the culture. People definitely appreciate that, and those things go a long way. But again, I unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans that go over there and that want no parts of that. Don't want to learn the language. They want to eat McDonald's all the time, and it's unfortunate. But I'm really, I really appreciate that I was able to go overseas, learn a little bit about you know a different way of how to do things. My wife is from the Czech Republic, and so I'm reminded about that all the time. You know, but it was a great experience for me, and I want people to have an opportunity, if they do go overseas, to have a long career. And I think some of the things that I was talking about in the book, I think can help guys.
Well, I think what you're saying to me is and you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk, but you are going to become all in or part of the community, right? By doing these various things. And you're literally, to me, I always told people, like, if you move to town, you're living out of a suitcase versus moving in. Now you're becoming part of the community. So I got to ask you to that last question I want to ask you is, I know you were an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about your line of clothes and what you got going there.
Yeah, you know what? We haven't really had an opportunity to do much of it now. But it started because, so when we first went overseas, everybody was really crazy about the shorts, right? Like, as a basketball player, you always collected shorts. And
Hmm.
so overseas they have a ton of logos all over the shorts, right? And it was like when you came back from overseas and you had the shorts, everybody wanted a pair. And so my good friend of mine, Damien, hit me up and was like, "Yo, man, I'm thinking about starting a clothing line." I'm like, you know what? And I was overseas at the time, and we played overseas, but he had ended up leaving. And so I'm like, you know what? I was also thinking about the same thing. And he was like, um, so why don't we do it together? I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it together. So we were trying to think of a name. And I don't exactly remember how we came up with the name, but I know it was because we both were in Europe, and so we wanted to have something with Europe in it, and so we called it Euro Game Gear. Um, I ended up finding a guy in the Czech Republic, in Ditchin. Actually, I was one of the cities that I played in. He was a graphic designer, so he designed our first logo, and I started to wanted to promote the brand. So what I did was I had these bright neon green, neon pink, neon orange headbands. And I had the logo was huge. And if you look at the book, the front of the cover of the book, I think I have one of those. I had a white one. I think one of those. I had maybe white or yellow, but I had one of those logos on my headband. I wore a headband when I played.
Like Jim
Um,
McMahon, the football player, right? I
right,
mean, the
right,
Adidas,
right,
yeah.
right.
Yep.
And so I started, wearing the headbands, and all the referees were really against it, telling me that I couldn't wear the headbands, and so we started to sell the headbands, we started to sell T-shirts, and it just kind of took off from there. And once I became a head coach in Europe, it was really hard for me to kind of continue on with the brand, and so Damien was really spearheading it for a long time. And then I had an opportunity to go and see him this July, and we just both just kind of was laughing about it, was just saying maybe we need to, maybe need to get that back going again. But yeah, we had a website, and we had a,
Retro. Now it's
yeah, we
retro, man. Now it's popular.
Yeah, we had it going for quite some time, but not as much anymore because he's super busy. I have no time now to run a clothing brand because it takes a lot of work. And so maybe once I'm retired or something, we can get it back going.
Air Jordan's got nothing on you, man. That's what I'm going to tell you.
Hey,
Well,
I've always had the entrepreneurial bug.
See?
Whether it be that, whether it be real estate. I'm always, I always want to do something. I always wanted to work for myself and be my
Mhm.
own boss and all those kind of things. And so yeah, I'm always looking to do things.
good
My
stuff.
guy.
Good stuff.
My guy.
Well,
All
Coach,
right.
we're up against it. I just want to thank you for coming out. Our guest today has been Levell Sanders. Appreciate your time and all the best this season. We're going to be following you now, and hopefully, I know Sonny goes to a lot of the games. Hopefully, I can get up there and we'll go check you guys out at a game and maybe take you out for dinner. Sonny's got some good spots up there, as you know. So we'll get
Yes.
together and see you guys play. Okay.
Yes. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Sparrow. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. Check us out on all things social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar, and on YouTube. All of our episodes are on. We ask you that you like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
Thanks, folks.